three, it's the dream team. Adam, Bobby, Josh, you got the news feed. It's the big three, it's the dream team. Big three, IDP, let's go.
What's up, you diehards, you degenerates, you lovers of defensive football? This is Josh Raymer, and we are back with another episode of the Big Three IDP podcast. And I'm joined in the Sode Shack tonight, as always, by Adam Markham on my right, Connor Raymer on my left, and joining us in the virtual Sode Shack, we are so delighted to welcome back one of our absolute favorite guests. You know him from NFL.com and the Around the NFL podcast. Welcome back to the show, Marc Sessler. Marc, how are you, man?
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks for having me back. I think when we last spoke, it was right in the first iterations of Corona time, and I was trapped in my house back then, and I'm still essentially trapped in a home. So, not much has changed, but suddenly we're beyond the midpoint of the regular season. So it's shot by all at the same time.
It's been weird because that felt like the world was starting to teeter on its axis when coronavirus hit. And you thought, okay, maybe the next time we have Marc on the show, things will be a little more normal. Nope, Corona is still rocking our world. We just finished with the election. The world felt a little more topsy-turvy last week. But yeah, the one thing that I think we all worried might get taken away in the midst of the craziness, Marc, is that the NFL season, we might lose games. It might not happen. And thus far, we have to give the NFL some credit. Things have been running along pretty smoothly.
Well, I mean, they benefit from being a multi-billion-dollar company that can afford this sort of daily testing. I think that's really helped them. The players, I give credit to the players because, there have been a few hiccups here and there, but my concern was just the human nature element of it, especially now when you get into this time of year where you got a couple teams out there that know that coaching changes are coming, that know that, their players are working on their own future careers and wondering if it will even be with their current teams. And so if you got a health issue, do you check out a little bit? I mean, they've been really professional and a few flare-ups. I think this is the month, though, this past week, where you start to get concerned. I mean, it really kind of blew up in the past week. And I think there have been a couple games that you could say the equity, if you wanted to look at it from the outside and say you're going to lose like 4 offensive linemen due to Corona contact or whether they actually have it, that's real messy, but they're doing the best job they can. In football, by its nature, has really lucked out by being a week-to-week sport because this is the, multiple weeks in a row you have a quarterback landing on the list on a Monday, and if they're clear by Saturday, they play. And these guys are, I think, missing practice time matters. It really does in ways that I just think that we don't know because we're not there every day, especially for younger players and reps. But I think teams are just like, this is a weird year. It's totally messed up. We're going to do the best we can. And the best teams have been the ones that have been resilient and not, I think, focused on the negative. Just said it's a week-to-week confrontation. You go in with the guys you have and, no games skipped yet. I think that there's still an option that could happen, though.
Yeah, of course, the owners approved the expanded 16-team playoff today if we do lose games because of the coronavirus. And you're right, Marc. I think sometimes you're okay, rolling into these situations with limited practice. Certain teams are going to be able to handle that well. And then sometimes you're the San Francisco 49ers against the Green Bay Packers, or you're Matthew Stafford, playing with no practice and looking real erratic. So I think this season in particular, every season's a war of attrition, right? But this one is going to be a war of attrition in a totally different way that teams aren't prepared for. So we're going to see that discipline come through, and I think it's going to be the discipline that comes from the top down, from the ownership down to the GM, down to the coaches, down to the players.
Yeah, and you're right. That Packers-Niners game was the one that I think I watched and thought to myself, well, you're taking a promising Niners team out of the mix, and that was not all Corona related. I mean, their injury list,
oh my gosh,
it's seismic. I mean, it's crazy, and there's not that many teams dealing with that. And there's only so much that Kyle Shanahan, I love Kyle Shanahan, but there's only so much you can ask a coaching staff to do. I mean, I look at the Miami Dolphins who pulled off an incredible victory last week, but quietly had 5 coaches not available for the game because of Corona. So it's all over the place. And if there's an asterisk on the year, I mean, the asterisk applies to all 32 teams to some degree. And so, I still see it as a genuine, true regular season and hopefully a real playoff campaign. But a couple teams have legit beefs, I think, with what they've experienced. I just think you won't hear about it now. There'll be books and pamphlets and tweets written about it down the road for sure.
Can't wait to read those pamphlets, Eddie.
Yeah.
I will say that I do miss from week one. What a different time it was. Andy Reid, that face visor fogging up, literally can't see the field.
I need that back.
Yeah, we need that back in our lives. There was a great Kevin Clark tweet, I think it was, that said, imagine how the Chiefs would be playing if Andy Reid had seen the field at any point tonight.
Total guinea pig scenario. Yeah,
it was. Yeah, yep. Poor Andy Reid got tossed right into the wolves' den here. With the face coverings, and since then we've adapted pretty well. I feel like
it's been fun seeing how all the coaches have treated the mask and
yes.
how they've worn them. I know Belichick, like the first few weeks, was out there looking like a bird, like the way he had his
he had the plague mask, right? The big long plague mask with the beak.
Looking kind of scary.
He did.
Yeah. But yeah, a lot of these coaches are pretty dumb.
Yep.
They'll take down the mask to yell stuff
right in their player's face.
It does. COVID cannot spread if you're yelling at an official for something.
That's true.
It's on record. Yeah.
That's
and during
scientifically
games.
True. Yeah.
During games, it's not supposed to spread.
It is kind of interesting, right? Because they've all been tested. Everyone gets tested before the games. Players are out there like sitting on top of each other, like breathing in each other's faces, and yet the coaches are getting fined like $500,000 for taking their mask down to take a swig of Gatorade. Like it's a little bit like safety theater, but it's one of those things where we have to be overly cautious because you're right, Mark. We have seen it this week. We're getting those sort of like Raiders and Titans type lapses where teams are getting hit. You're starting to see it pop up on Twitter, like boom, 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 right in a row, like 4 tweets right when you wake up of, these 18 players have tested positive for COVID. Ben Roethlisberger, Baker Mayfield hit the list. I think these were all close contact situations, but
did you say that you started playing fantasy again this year?
I did. Yeah. And
you took a little bit of a break.
Well, I took a 8-year break. So I don't know what I would call that. But I came back into the fold and teams sitting in first place, tied for first place.
Nice.
It's with other people from work. So, you have to, you're right. When you wake up every morning and there's news about Corona and news about everything else, like it adds an element of, I guess it's fun, but it feels to me like pressure. I got to get on that waiver wire and start looking for replacements and things of such nature. But, I like to think of myself as a survivor during the fantasy season, constantly churning the roster.
That's right.
Lots of transactions. I like to have a completely different team if I can by midseason. And, some of that's been forced on me because of injuries. Not a new story for anyone playing fantasy.
Yeah, that could be a great subtitle just for 2020 in general. I guess it's fun. Like takeout for every meal, Netflix every day. Like,
yeah, it's stressful. Like I'm in 12 leagues, Mark. And so, my
He's
Sunday
insane.
mornings are very stressful checking, going through the lineups and seeing who's inactive, last minute, all that stuff. It's, and these are leagues like where we're starting like 20 plus players.
Yes, it's not like 8 players, and a defense and a kicker. It's full like 22, 23 man roster.
Yeah, it's real.
Well, I have nothing to complain. I mean, I sound like a total softie complaining about my one team where I had to figure out what to do with one guy on a bye. It's like, please.
Yeah,
it's the one team that's in first place though. So
that's true.
Mark, did you hit him with like the Jordan, like I'm back letter when you announced like, hey, I'm getting back in the fold here, guys?
No, I think this is, I know these guys well, that it's mostly people that you would know that we work with. I think that they were completely unimpressed with the fact that I jumped out of fantasy for 7 or 8 years. And my return was met with mostly ambivalence. But that's why I'm determined to not, I just don't want to, I didn't want to do it and then jump in and be like 1-8. So it's like, you just gotta be a horse in the race for the playoff thing. And I do think that there is an element of chaos. I find it funny that the off season for anyone covering football, it's like, it's this static nature where you just you have no new information until like free agency hits and stuff, but so much attention put on the draft. And within 3 weeks, like most people's drafts look like utter chaos with injuries and other stuff happening. I'm much more interested in like how to, rebuild your team 2 or 3 times in one season, because the people not doing that seem to be the ones left dead by the side of the road.
Yeah, there's a great saying in fantasy football: you don't win your league at the draft. You set the foundation, and especially this year, that foundation a little more porous than usual, Addy.
Yeah, it's definitely the weirdest year. It's a good one to hop back in.
I was going to say, you picked a hell of a year to jump back in. Did you
Might
jump
not
back
be a,
in?
yeah, might not be a fair snapshot.
Yeah, when Corona had already happened, or did you go in knowing that it was going to be a Corona year?
No, I knew, because I mean, that was, I didn't decide till like August to do it.
Okay.
I just found it fun, your show and a few other shows. I think that fantasy analysis has become so strong. And, we've got like our Evan Silvas and stuff like that, that I spent a lot of August, when there was no preseason, which was honestly really helpful to kind of read up and study on the season itself. I mean, preseason gives you other knowledge. So I guess I know why you'd want that, but I find it time consumingly tedious and bad football also. So I really plugged in on like a lot of different fantasy stuff for the first time ever, and was really pleasantly surprised with like the knowledge, the super amount of passion. Like it's just a little bit of a different world than like straight news analysis. So I will continue to play because it keeps me engaged. I mean, it's fun, and I don't know why I jumped out, other than that I had a little bit too much of football in my life with, small kids at home and other stuff, which none of that's changed. So it's just that I'm home so often. Yes, I have time to check my fantasy lineup.
Yeah, settings aren't necessarily ideal from a fantasy perspective, but from a playing fantasy perspective, this has actually been a pretty good year, unless you're like Addy and you just go wild getting into, half a dozen or a dozen different leagues. And then, you're just kind of setting a lineup in half of them by the time you get to week 8, just praying for the, fantasy season to be over.
Yeah, we're just focused on the big money ones now.
That's right.
That's all we care about.
That's right.
I like
get those big money leagues. So, Marc, it is wonderful to have you back on the show. We're really excited. Like I said, you bring a really fun kind of zany energy to the Around the NFL podcast, which every one of our listeners should check out. It's the absolute best fantasy or football recap show that's out there. You guys have the flagship every Sunday where you recap all the games, and then you all preview the games. I mean, every game gets talked about. All the storylines are covered. It's a great pod.
I love the little clip ins of like the broadcast
yes
and stuff.
Yes, I think Ricky Hollywood clips those for you guys, right?
Yeah, she does a great job. I mean, producing today is social media. It's basically 4 or 5 different jobs in one that didn't even exist, I think 10 years ago. So she was the perfect person to do that, but she's also a complete asset and part of our team on air too. So we've lucked out with her, and at some point I think she'll probably move on to something much bigger than what we have her attached to right now.
Yeah, working with Handsome Hank over in Head of International or something like that. Get one of those third story corner offices. So,
yes.
But yeah, so on the Around the NFL podcast, you all talk about, you have these segments where you make predictions or talk about storylines, stuff that you guys are excited about. And so that's what we want to kick things off with, Marc. We want to hear from you. The NFL Hydra, it seems, sprouts a new head every few days that we have to talk about ad nauseum. And so as we go, we're past the halfway point of the season now, which is crazy. There's a lot of storylines that have kind of fallen by the wayside because of our short attention span as an American public. And so I want to talk to you about some under the radar storylines that you think not enough people are talking about. So let's kick it off with the first storyline that you think deserves a little more attention.
Well, I think we are in 2020, and it's not like there are these, earth-shattering developments out there that no one knows about. So I think that when I hear under the radar, what are we going to, what is everyone going to be talking about like 6 weeks from now? And for me, I think that, guys like you're plugged in day by day on fantasy, something like the Miami Dolphins would not be a surprise to you because you're tracking them weekly. But I think that if you look at the trajectory of this team, they really remind me of now Brian Flores. I think he's one of the Belichick acolytes who can coach with a Belichickian feel. This reminds me of that 2001 Patriots team. And we had to redo our midseason predictions and rankings and Super Bowl picks. And I did not do this just to be flashy. I put the Dolphins in the Super Bowl. And I know that sounds crazy. here's why I really think it can happen. I think the Tua thing is working. He is someone that I think can change that franchise forever. But Brian Flores reminds me so much of Bill Belichick in the sense that all three phases of that team contribute weekly. And there aren't that many teams out there that can take a gaggle of no-namers and have them become something really special over the course of a couple months. I'm thinking of someone like Emmanuel Ogbah, who has blown up in the past couple of weeks in Miami. Every week it's someone new. I mean, they're banged up. Their backfield's really banged up. That's something that needs a little bit of attention. But they're not a star-studded team like the Chiefs, like the Steelers, like the Ravens. So it's a long way to go. But if you go back and look at the 2001 Patriots teams, there were other opponents and enemies in the mix that you would have said, no way would they have gotten past that. They were 4-4 at the midpoint. They were completely unremarkable. They made a quarterback switch that people, away from Drew Bledsoe, which now everyone says, of course, but back then that was huge. I mean, that was like a huge, changing of the guard in the NFL. And I think that Brian Flores coaches with total conviction and confidence. So, I think a lot of people get that the Dolphins are on the rise to some degree. I think that the underrated part of it is that it might happen a lot quicker than people realize. Chris Greer, the GM, has stockpiled picks for 2021 and 2022. But I think that 2020 might put them in the AFC title game. And then, look at the Jaguars almost went to the Super Bowl a couple years ago. You get into the playoffs, literally anything can happen. Corona adds a total X factor if they're lucky on that front with injuries too. I really think that we just have no idea what the ceiling is with Brian Flores as coach.
Yeah, it's a great point. The Jags almost made the Super Bowl with Blake Bortles.
Right.
Like, we forget about that. And we have to, even though Tua's only had his second start, this is a quarterback that has flashed some serious potential thus far. You're right. This is kind of a defense of no names. I mean, you got Andrew Van Ginkel out there making plays, having the wild blonde hair. It's amazing.
I'm convinced he was created somewhere else. And they thought the only real tell is the name. We're going to give him a name that looks like a toy soldier from the 1600s. And let's see who catches on to that. But he's been great.
Yeah, it's like one of Santa's elves, right? Like, you could see it if they make a sequel to Elf, like there's a Van Ginkel over in the corner.
Absolutely.
So we know Mark's opinion there on the Dolphins. He's in on them. They're for real.
Yeah, so we're going to have the next segment. Yeah. We'll talk more about the Dolphins here in just a bit, but I'm with you, Mark. This was, I think, in our wild predictions episode last time you were on, I said the Dolphins were going to win the AFC East, and that was just pulling something completely out of thin air. I was not a fan of the Tua move because it felt like it felt wrong to bench Fitzpatrick when he was playing pretty well. It seemed like he was kind of streaky, but for the most part made the team fun, made them competitive. But I did acknowledge at that point, I was like, there's a chance, and we can't ignore this, that the coaches think Tua is better. This is not just about evaluating for 2021, Addy, but also, what if he just gives them a better chance to maybe win this division, make the playoffs?
Hey, 2-0.
2-0. See, that's the stuff you get being in the same room, right there, Mark.
We were in on Tua for the record. I mean, Markham and I were, and Josh kind of had his reservations, but I've been impressed with him. I mean, especially to overcome a hip injury like that. I'm sure the mental hurdle you have to convince yourself, hey, I'm ready to see live snaps. I didn't have a preseason. And I mean, he's, like you mentioned though, Mark, I mean, the whole team as a whole, they're performing well, and that's kind of been
coached so well.
Yeah, I was going to say that's kind of been the story there with Flores.
I didn't like Fitzpatrick doing that whole.
They said he broke his heart, so I mean, what's up with that?
You didn't see it coming, dude. You're like 38, and they drafted Tua like 5th or 6th. He's been cleared for like months. You didn't see this coming.
I think when he had the chest hair out and the magnificent shirt there on Thursday Night Football, he was just swagging hard. He was like, "This is my team. They're gonna ride with me until I get hurt or something happens." But I mean, the Tua thing, and Mark, to the maybe the debut, right, wasn't the best. The defense really carried Tua in that first game, but to outduel Kyler Murray in a Cardinals team that has been on the rise this season, that was just a huge win and a confidence boost for the Dolphins.
Another thing that I think we see this, but the speed that this might happen. I remember when I was young and as a Browns fan, a Sports Illustrated season preview arrived on my door with Bernie Kosar on the cover. It said the last great quarterback. And I thought, wow, that's my quarterback. So I'm excited to hear that. but they were kind of comparing him to Johnny Unitas. But then that game, Tua and Kyler, I just think that we are looking at the end of the statuesque, immobile, one-dimensional, unathletic quarterback. You know, the 6'5" guy that has a great arm but can't do anything else. The ratio of those dudes is going to shrink to 4 or 5 over the next couple of years. Some of them will be too hard to pass up on, but the NFL's changing so quickly that it's not, 2 decades from now that it's going to look different. I think within 4 or 5 years, you're going to have like the Kylers and the Tuas, Deshaun's, Josh Allen in his own right, these guys that can just dominate athletically. And it's like whoever's not paying attention to that and finding that quarterback in the next couple of years will be left heavily by the side of the road like so many Chicago Bears.
It's to quote you, Mark, and I'll it's a Stone Age pony, and I love this. I just Googled Marc Sessler Stone Pony. I wanted to make sure that was the right phrase. You from October 17th, 2019, which somehow still applies because Joe Flacco is still in our lives. Joe Flacco, nothing more than a Stone Age pony prancing about Mesozoic deathscapes. So you're right. I think this is going to be the end of the Stone Age pony. I think of Connor, Peyton Manning, right? Like
Phillip Rivers trying to make that tackle this weekend. I hate to,
Tom Brady
with the zombie arms coming up off the ground with him laying on his back. Yeah, I think we're seeing the end of this kind of statue, concrete shoes in the pocket, can't move, can't escape, can't extend the play. That is just where the NFL is going. Chris Wessling on the Around the NFL podcast talks all the time about the evolution of the game and especially the evolution of the quarterback position. And we are seeing it now with a lot of these elder statesmen like, Breeze, like a Tom Brady, like a Phillip Rivers and Ben Roethlisberger from a different era are giving way to the Mahomes and the Russell Wilsons and the Kylers and the Tuas that can escape the pocket and make things happen. It's a very exciting time to be a fan of the NFL. You always wonder, are we in good hands with this next generation of quarterbacks? I think the answer is a resounding yes.
Very good hands.
Very good hands. So, Mark, any other storylines that are under the radar, in your opinion, that we should be paying more attention to?
I think the 8 playoff thing, the 8-team playoff thing in each conference is, yes, it's Corona related. I mean, it's a nice idea and a stopgap for this season, but I think it's something that they would want to continue forever and continue to grow the playoffs. I mean, we already know about the idea of 17 regular season games, but if this happens, and I think that there will be, because they've already approved it, I think they're basically saying, like, instead of having to keep pushing the envelope with some of these teams, forcing them into action, if we have this plan, and if this happens, and if 8 teams creates, you don't have this number 1 bye where that one team alone gets the bye week at this point, I think it may never go away, right? Because it means more money, yet the purists, and I put myself in this category where I didn't really want 7 playoff teams from each conference, because I think we're already going to get dangerously close to, junk appearing in January, and we're already tired of those teams haven't deserved it in many cases. Maybe a year or 2 where they do, and you'd be like, cool, we added this one team that was a ton of fun. I mean, maybe we're talking about the Dolphins this year, I don't know, but 8 teams feels really, really, really a bit rich to me. But wherever money is to be made, I would consider that part of the future, not a stopgap.
Yeah, it's follow the money. Dan likes to say money makes the world go round, and it's true with these NFL owners. There's a tricky balance between watering down the product, right, the NFL playoffs, and making money. But most of the time, they are going to lean toward that making money side of the equation, because each of these games is such a valuable product from a ticket sales perspective in a non-corona year, from the TV rights, all the money that's to be made there. So, yeah, I think you're exactly right. When I saw this, I was like, oh, they are backdoor beta testing this idea.
Bingo.
In a corona year, and with the intention of adding that 8th team to the playoff in the future. And, it's one of those things where I'm with you. When I heard that we were adding another team to the playoff, I kind of rolled my eyes. It was annoying, right? We had this perfect setup, with the 2 teams getting the bye in each conference. But I think over time, what I've learned is that we'll get used to anything, right? Like 4 or 5 years from now, we'll look back and say, I can't believe there were ever just 12 teams in the playoffs. Now there's 16. It is a little rich for me. I don't want to go there. I think we will have more junk then we will have legitimate teams in the playoffs, but the owners are going to get what they want.
Yeah, and I think the other fix there, and it's not going to happen this time around. And when we talked about this on our show today, we didn't have the full story, but the ranking seeds by winning percentage. So you don't have the Eagles hosting this year's Eagles hosting a playoff game. Now that it will apply to this season, but I think down the road that they will fix that too. I think we can all get behind that a frisky, second place team in an awesome division supersedes a crappy division winner that gets a home game when it really will matter when there are huge crowds. I mean, if Philly were able to fill that stadium with crowds, you're looking at Beastquake too, because I could really see the Eagles could beat anyone in a weird playoff game, right? I mean, so it just seems unfair that they would, what probably will be like a 6-9-1 team would host a playoff game. To me, that feels like a total gaffe on the league's part that I think they'll correct.
Yeah, I was going more like a 4-11-1 Eagles team. Yeah.
Well, I'm being very optimistic.
Yes, you are. And I love that. And you're right. I think we have to get rid of these home games locked in because of the, top 4 seeds, the division winners or whatever. Throw that out. If we're expanding because we want more teams in, use logic and make the system better. Reward the teams that are good. The Cardinals, if they come in second place in that NFC West, should not be traveling to Philadelphia to play in the first round of the playoffs. That's not fair, especially if they finish, 9-6 or 9-7, 10-6. They should be the one hosting the playoff game. So you're right, Mark. Let's get that fixed. But I'll be very curious now to see, and Mark, I'd love your take on this, if the NFL has been so rigid in the Super Bowl is going to be played on the first Sunday in February. We are not going to move the draft. We are not going to move free agency. We are not going to lose games. Do you think they loosen up the reins a little bit so they can try out this idea this year?
Well, I think that the one thing they've said is, they don't want to be flexible just for the sake of being flexible. They want to move things just because of concerns. If concerns became genuine real-time issues that they had to deal with, canceled games, yes, I think they would move all that. Now, I mean, the Super Bowl is a lot harder to move on a year when, 80,000 people have booked hotels and purchase game tickets, and another 4 billion media and staff members and, talking heads are all meant to go, and plane tickets have been purchased. It's a lot easier to move some of that stuff this year. So like with other sports have had to do, the NFL probably is not immune to that. If they had to change, I think they've said all along, safety first. We want to keep everything in place, but if they have to, I think they will. I think it's very clear that it is a last resort. I mean, in last resort, meaning like things would need to melt hard.
Yeah, hopefully we don't reach that point. Lord, just let us finish out this season the way it's been going. Things have been going pretty well so far. Don't take football from us. Please don't do that. But Mark, you mentioned junk seeping into the playoffs potentially if we go to 8 teams per conference. And that's what we want to talk about next. We want to talk about, we're past the halfway point. We want to start to figure out some of these teams that are a little bit on the borderline. Are they for real or are they frauds? So we sent you a 6-pack of teams, all with winning records right now, and we asked you to rate them on a scale of 0 to 10, with 10 being Super Bowl contenders, heck, maybe even Super Bowl favorites, and 0 being they flame out and miss the playoffs, or their stadium is swallowed up by a sinkhole, and some natural disaster, ends their season prematurely. So we are going to kick things off. It is no surprise if anyone has listened to your show or follows you on social media. They know you are a Cleveland Browns fan. The Browns sit at 5-3. So, Mr. Sessler, 0 to 10, how are you feeling about your Browns right now?
All right. Well, I don't have any 10s to begin with in this thing because I think that we're looking at teams that have, strengths and weaknesses. The Browns get a 6 from me. I'll tell you real quick why I think that they get to 6 versus something lower. They've won games without Nick Chubb. They've won games without Austin Hooper. They've won games without Wyatt Teller, who was the top-ranked interior lineman in the league, and their run game really misses him. They've been resilient on that front. They don't go higher than a 6 because, as we know, when they've had to go wage war with the Ravens and the Steelers, they've been horrendously waxed. I thought that they were out-muscled by the Raiders in bad Cleveland weather at home. That was not a great sign to me. So I think that they're a team that has made great progress. I think they're well coached. They've got a good front office. That's a modern front office. So it's more like, for me, the Browns are a 3 or 4 year arc. What can they become? They're only halfway there right now. And I think that they're like other teams, learning to win. So a 6 doesn't feel like I'm ripping them off, but I could see them sneaking into the playoffs and losing if they even get there. I could also see them not getting there, but being a 9-7 team.
Yeah, I think that's about where I would have him. Addy, where are you coming in on this range?
Oh, yeah, loving them now they got Odell out of the way, the locker room cancer.
Yeah, Adam's been big on this kick about people saying that the team is better off without Odell Beckham. I will say this, Mark. I want to get – it is not. I want to get your take. Is Myles Garrett the best defensive player in the NFL?
Well, I think that, that's just looked at by numbers and stuff. I think Myles Garrett, Aaron Donald is still the number one defensive player to me, because you can point to anything Myles Garrett has done and you can say that, Donald had a game where he had 4 sacks and he completely destroyed Washington. So I think that they're both completely disruptive. Myles Garrett is a defensive player of the year candidate, though, because they've won a bunch of close games, and I think they'd probably have 2 or 3 wins without him, because he's had key turnovers in close games that set up scores. And that's what you want from your best defensive player. So when he's on the field, he's a total menace. He missed a bunch of that Raiders game. And it reminded me of when he, post-helmet incident a year ago, when he wasn't on that field, a bad defense, and Cleveland's defense is pretty bad, became a complete and total raging liability. So Garrett changes everything when he's in there.
Yeah, it's so good to have him back, to have his head screwed back on straight. And I do think that the helmet incident was very isolated. That was such a surreal night. I'm sure it was for you, especially as a Browns fan. In our main fantasy league, the front running team had just traded a 1st-round pick to get Myles Garrett. He goes and tries to cave another man's skull in, 3/4 of a game into his run with this team. So I look back somewhat fondly, because that's the villain of our league, but it's good to have Myles Garrett back. All that said, Connor, where are you coming down on the Browns? 0 to 10. Where do they fall for you?
I think Mark's definitely in the ballpark there on the 6 range. Of course, they handed our Colts a loss, and
they did.
I think losing Odell, even though Mark, I'm kind of tongue in cheek there, hit on, they're better somehow without. We're better without our better players, I guess. So I don't know. I'd have to do some.
Anytime you can lose a superstar player, it's going to be a boost for your team.
For sure.
That's just logic.
Right. Yeah.
Well, that's how it works.
Yeah. It's the extra playoff team will help. I think they'll be, looking at these teams that can actually hang on in the AFC, I would think they're one that will at least hang around for a wild card spot.
I agree. I think 6 is right there where they should be.
Is Odell a Cleveland Brown next year, Mark?
Well, I think that, the past regime traded for him. And that was a John Dorsey type move, where it was, we want to pick up veterans and star players through free agency and through trades. This front office is not really one that operates that way. I think that they would like to build through the draft. And Odell Beckham, the sample size isn't huge, but it hasn't been a great fit in Cleveland. And it depends on what they can maneuver and what they can do in terms of getting young wide receivers. They need help. I think the reason that they're not a better team without him is that they just aren't very deep at that position. And your best cornerback's on Jarvis Landry, and your second best is on, Hollywood Higgins. So it's like, I think that's just a lesser situation. I would go 60-40 that he is not on the Browns, but I don't think that's because he's a problem or anything to do with that. I think it just maybe this front office sees team building a little bit differently. I don't think they can get much for him either. I really don't. So he may stay if the value isn't enough.
Yeah, I think if he hadn't gotten hurt, maybe a team comes and offers a 2nd-round pick and maybe a future 1st, or, they could get a pretty nice haul for him, I think, even with the issues they had. But coming off the ACL, that changes the equation for me. I wouldn't be shocked if he wasn't on the Browns, but I think because they're not going to be able to get anything for him coming off, knee surgery, I think he's there next year.
Yeah.
I think he could still fetch a 2nd in the right situation. Just because he's going to bring a lot of fanfare too. I know he brings a lot of drama at times.
That's true.
But he's a splash move that the fans would love to see.
What did Nuke bring? A second and a player?
He brought
not enough. Not
nearly enough.
Obviously,
David Johnson and a second-round pick, I think, Mark.
For Nuke Hopkins?
For Nuke Hopkins, yeah.
Well, I mean but I would never. I think that the 31 other teams looked at that trade and thought that the Texans were crazy. I don't think that will ever be the baseline. They should have gotten more for Hopkins, and but I don't think Odell would get much more than that. And I think that to your point that someone would want him. There's got to be coaches that think, well, that's Cleveland's fault that it didn't work out for Odell. We can make it work here.
Absolutely. Well, let's move on to this next team here. Connor's rocking the pullover here for this. Our beloved Indianapolis Colts, coming off a tough loss to the Baltimore Ravens, sitting at 5-3. So, Mark, give us your take. 0 to 10. How are you seeing the Indianapolis Colts?
I don't think they're far from the Browns. I gave them a 5.4. Here's the thing. I love their defense. I don't see a defense in the league that tackles better in open field scenarios. They've got great team speed. They're so deep up front that if they had an offense that could complement their defense, they'd be much higher for me. I just don't trust their offense. I think that Chris Wesseling said it really well on our show on Sunday that these young pieces that you had a lot of hope around haven't really done their job, and there's a lot more reliance on Phillip Rivers than you hoped. I think Jonathan Taylor had become like this fascinating young runner that was destroying teams week after week behind that line. They'd be in the 8 territory for me. They're just not that type of team, and I don't trust teams that at this time of year haven't clicked on offense.
Yeah, it seems like there are 3 key things that I think are holding back the Colts offense right now. Number 1, losing Paris Campbell. You saw it week 1, that game. Paris Campbell was electric. I believe he'd be this team's number 1 wide receiver if he had not gotten hurt. Jonathan Taylor not being the running back that we thought he was going to be behind one of the league's best offensive lines. And Phillip Rivers' continued streakiness with even more diminished skills, especially that arm talent that we love to talk about. He still thinks he can make all the throws, but he can't. And so there are going to be some games, right, like the 2 before the Baltimore Ravens game where you saw Rivers was playing very, very well. We got those wins. But it really does, for me, it's hard to assign a score, Connor, because it feels like, well, which version of Phillip Rivers are we going to get rest of season?
And you can say that, in my opinion, about a few different aspects. And I'm a huge Frank Reich fan. I think his, kind of creative play calling is something to be, is something that a lot of teams desire to have. But I feel like there are times that either Frank can't quite figure out the hand he's playing with, or he's trying to get out at, kind of getting just pretzeling himself almost on play calling.
Getting a little too cute, we said earlier this season.
That's well said.
And the Phillip Rivers thing, and this is kind of a synopsis for a lot of teams. And Mark alluded to this earlier, is the teams that didn't have continuity of their roster and their coaching that missed that preseason and missed that time. I think you're seeing that at those key positions. So a guy like Rivers, who, like you said, his arm is. I don't think it's Manning his final year in Denver shot.
Not that bad.
He already gets the ugliest throwing, motion award of all time, but he is putting literally every ounce he has into every throw. So a lot of screens, offense is limited, as Mark alluded to as well. So they're in the Browns territory for me as well. I hope that they're contending for a spot, but if Mark's prediction earlier is correct about the Dolphins, I would honestly probably think it will be, unless they somehow sneak up and take the East from the Bills. I mean, it's hard to say. So
I think you're looking at 2 teams from the East. I think you could be looking at 2 teams from the South.
AFC North, you have
AFC
the Steelers
North,
and the Ravens.
I
mean, it's it seems more and more slim the more you talk about it. But again, if there were 2 teams from this list, I would probably hedge a little more towards the Browns. Just I like what they have better there with Baker and just an overall team, even though they're missing Odell. And
even though Baker's up and down, I feel like the ceiling is higher than what you're getting from, almost 40-year-old Phillip Rivers at this point. Yeah, I agree, Mark. I think they're right around that 6 mark for me. I think they could win a playoff game if they make it in, but I've said all along the ceiling for this team is 1 playoff win and an exit from there. So another team that was in action and picked up a very nice, very much needed win to stay ahead of these frisky Dolphins, the Buffalo Bills, sitting at 7-2. I have a feeling, Mark, this may be one of the highest scoring teams for you.
Yeah, it is, because I think that was a signature win, and I really believe in the coach front office combination here. They've improved every year. They identify their needs in the offseason. They make good free agent acquisitions. The Stephon Diggs trade. Now, we never knew where we'd be in November with Stephon Diggs and Josh Allen. I think the variance there was wide, and it's going well. They had it. They aren't slump proof, and we've seen that. Like, there were real questions about that Patriots game. The week before, they didn't blow up. They've had their struggles, but their defense isn't the same. They're just a bit of a different Bills team than you're used to. But the Seattle game to me was, I think, first of all, Patriots was like, there were psychological ghosts dealing with New England if you're Buffalo. And every team that's trying to emerge has that one enemy to slay before you really can kind of step into your own. I think the celebration was the Seahawks game. I mean, you're playing a bad defense, and that's fine, but they also laid total waste to the bad Seahawks defense. So I think that they're a team that could probably beat anyone in the right week, and then they could really disappoint you another. And I buried the lead because I gave them an 8.
Yeah, that's exactly where I thought you were going to come down with them. It makes a lot of sense because we saw beginning of the season when Josh Allen was getting MVP buzz. This is a player that absolutely has taken a step forward, but he is not, unlike Russell Wilson or Patrick Mahomes, who are never going to have that kind of just crap the bed game where they totally let the team down. Josh Allen isn't quite to that point yet. His ceiling has raised, his floor has raised, but there's still a wide gap there between those two. So I agree. I think an 8. And to touch on the Stephon Diggs thing, this is one of the most interesting points of this season. Addy, as our Vikings fan, you would have been lying if you would have said the Bills and Stephon Diggs are happy and the Minnesota Vikings are happy with the player that they drafted with that Diggs pick.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're happy long term. I mean, one of these teams is 7-2, the other's 3-5.
Yes. Justin Jefferson, though, one of the bright spots.
Not great, but yeah, I mean, long term, this is a no brainer for really both sides. I do wonder if the Bills have any. I mean, I know Diggs is balling right now, but seeing like how great this class would have. I don't know if they would have selected Jefferson there as well, but man, some of these receivers in this class are really special. I think
they really are. You look at T. Higgins and Justin Jefferson and CeeDee Lamb and Jerry Jeudy. I mean, Brandon Ayuk out there in San Francisco, Visca Chenault, with our boy Juke Luton down in Jacksonville doing big things. But yeah, so I think the Bills were looking at this as a win now situation, and they didn't want that learning curve with a Justin Jefferson type receiver. So they thought, let's go get Diggs. Hopefully he's not, tweeting cryptic emojis by mid-October, early November. And thus far, it's worked out well. So
the wide receiver 4 in fantasy PPR leagues.
That's right. I think he's leading the league in targets right now.
Yeah,
so
it's crazy.
It's worked out really well. I agree. The Bills are my pick to be the highest ceiling on this list of teams here. I think they have the best shot of these 6 to win the Super Bowl. So let's switch to the NFC now. We mentioned this team a little earlier, lost to the Dolphins this past week, the 5-3 Arizona Cardinals. I guess it's tough, Mark, because this is a team we saw flashes of potential last season. We were kind of waiting for that other shoe to drop. Is this team for real? Is the defense good enough? Is Cliff Kingsbury and Kyler Murray, are they a legit duo that can make magic happen in 2020? And thus far, looking pretty good. What's your score for these guys?
Yeah, I gave them a 7, and a strong 7. I think that could rise too, because this is one of these teams, and you get these every year, that start to spin a little bit of chaos and magic down the stretch. And I feel like they're another team that in an NFC crop of playoff teams where, I'm just not overly impressed with what's in the NFC. I don't feel like that there's 2 unbeatable teams. There's some back and forth butt kickings going on. I mean, the Bucs were, revealed to be less than perfect a week ago. Green Bay got stomped by Tampa Bay. So the Cardinals are a different type of offense that I think that, who can stop Kyler Murray? It's been really hard for teams to figure out that at all. So that's the kind of thing that might take an extra off season for teams to figure out. He's pretty unstoppable. I think that the DeAndre Hopkins deal had worked for them. There were questions if suddenly, Hopkins would disappear in an offense with 4 or 5 wide receivers on the field at all times. Not the case. Defense a little suspect, But I really feel like the Cardinals are one of these weird teams that could beat anyone. I have no idea what their ceiling is. So I think that's spicy. I don't think 7's too strong because I would give other teams in the NFC higher scores, some of those like entrenched playoff squads.
Yeah, and something to mention here, Addy, is that it's not just the offense. That defense is starting to come to life. Losing Chandler Jones definitely hurts, but you're seeing the emergence of Hassan Reddick. We said, could this be this year's Shaq Barrett, a player that, is not going to be anything, right? And all of a sudden, he is something, and it's exciting to watch, and he's making plays. So Reddick's coming on, your boy.
Traded for Marcus Golden.
Marcus Golden coming into town. Budda Baker, which we'll talk about here in just a second. And then you have Isaiah Simmons was playing like 4% of snaps, got up to 52 this past game. So watch out.
Yeah.
But this defense, I think, is starting to come to life a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there was any team that I was more excited about than the Cardinals, in the offseason. They, I think they have the highest upside on this list. I mean, I could see them getting hot. Kyler is unbelievable.
He really is. The most dangerous play is Kyler Murray in the open field right now.
Yeah. He was like Mike Vick-esque the other night. The way he was moving, I mean, he was gliding around the field. I mean, it was just a whole other, when he would stop and change directions. I mean, there's maybe Lamar that can do that since a guy like Vic has been in the league, but that's just different type of speed. I feel like he has an open field.
Yeah, it's a good argument. Who's the better runner, Kyler or Lamar?
Right now it's Kyler.
Kyler knows how to slide,
and that's from baseball. I mean, he was the baseball player. So
well, do you guys think 7 is too conservative?
No, because I do think they are only, one season removed from, what did they finish last year? They were still had a losing record,
5 and
right?
11 maybe?
Or something like that. Yeah. So I think I see them, but you're right. That NFC, who's the superpower?
It's Seattle, and then I think
Green Bay.
I think Green Bay, and then
Tampa Bay.
And Tampa Bay, and then I think Arizona's right there.
Yeah, I would put them right there in the mix around that 4 spot. So, I think anything can happen when you have a mobile quarterback. We have seen it. That is a game wrecker and an element that you can't quite plan for. And so I think he's the X factor that could, in my mind, maybe push them a little further. But I think 7's about right, Mark. I think you got it. So let's wrap up here with let's jump to the Dolphins, because you mentioned them in your storyline segment. So I'm curious to see now, sitting at 5-3, 2-0, as Adam brought up earlier with a beautiful pun. Where are they sitting for you on that 0 to 10 scale?
I have them at 7.5 for all the reasons that I mentioned. I love teams where I can just fall in love with the head coach, and I think that that's happening here. He maximizes all his players. They aren't the most talented roster, probably even compared to some of the teams on this list, but that, talented roster, it also depends on what you do with it. And I have a lot of growing trust in Miami. And so 7.5 was the second highest grade that I gave. I am someone that also can fall hard for certain developments, certain coaches, certain teams. So I have to check myself at the door a little bit. I mean, maybe Miami will still be taught a few lessons before this journey is over. I'm not saying they're going to just rip down the stretch, but I think they're a playoff team. I think they're a threat to win the East. If Buffalo goes into another slump, if they were to take a game from Buffalo, I'd be real concerned about Buffalo's chances to win the division. I don't know if that will matter too much in how the playoffs shake out. Sometimes you kind of, I would rather, the Dolphins could be a 7th seed. I wouldn't want to play them. I'd rather play some of these teams with better records. So I'm sort of future projecting what I think Miami will become versus what they are this minute.
Yeah, we do know you tend to fall hard for certain coaches. I think you might have been camped outside Matt Rule's house at some point.
Matt Rule can coach him up, man. I mean, like those Panthers games, they're not winning them right now, but he just reminds me the first thing I ever felt about Matt Rule, and it has a little bit to do with the college lineage, but just sort of who he is, the way he relates to players and kind of pulls certain players into his fold, like Robbie Anderson, who was a bit of a, he had issues in New York, and Matt Rule knows Robbie Anderson, and Robbie Anderson is blowing up in Carolina because of that relationship. I think he's a little bit of a Jimmy Johnson-esque type guy. And so, a lot of people thought that team was going to fall off the rails this season, maybe win 3 games. Go watch that Chiefs game. They nearly took that thing, and it's because of the aggressive nature of Matt Rule. So I like coaches like that, and I fall for the Kyle Shanahans, and I fall for the Brian Flores. It's because I think they're new, and I see a whole new wave of coaching. The idea of like you're just going to hire an old fat 60-year-old guy who's smoking cigars, that age is over. I mean, the coaches now have to relate to young players. They have to understand that meetings have to be shorter. I mean, it's like you got one or two old school guys, but Pete Carroll's your oldest coach, but I feel like he's younger than me half the time. So you have to be able to relate to a very interesting group of people that is your roster. And someone like Matt Rule is supreme at that.
Yes, he is. I will say I transformed into Teddy Bridgewater's mother during that game, watching him fly through the air on that reconstructed day. I was like, oh no, my sweet baby, please be okay. And he was, thank God. But I was holding my breath there along with Panthers Nation for a second. Teddy, please be safe. We love you. He's a Louisville guy. He's a Kentucky guy. We love that. And this team is frisky. I thought that might have been one of your storylines was watch out for the Panthers because we're going to be looking up, say, how did the Panthers sneak into the playoffs, at 9-7? But that's a team to watch out for as well. And we want to wrap up here. You talked about the NFC, not super strong. What about a team in the Cardinals' own division, the 5-3 Los Angeles Rams? I'm really curious your take because I feel like it's been a little bit of a not turbulent relationship, but you've had your issues with the Rams in the past. So where are they coming in for you right now?
Yeah, I give them I put them at 6 because I think they're going to I think they can make the playoffs. I think that they're obviously well coached. 6 to me though, because you go back to the Dolphins game, I think that was a roadmap on how to completely frustrate Jared Goff, how to make life real difficult for him, take advantage of a not perfect offensive line and unsaddle that offense. And I think that Brian Flores did that as part of the Super Bowl plan against the Patriots. So it's like Brian Flores essentially is 2-0 against Sean McVay. And I'd like to see how Sean McVay counters that. I think that that's a quarterback coach relationship where they're like tied at the hip. You don't trust Jared Goff to go call plays the same way that Big Ben would or someone else like that. I don't see a ton of growth from Jared Goff. I think he has other quarters where he looks really, really good. The Rams, to me, they got beaten pretty severely by the Niners. The score didn't look that way, but that game was not that close. The Dolphins took them pretty easily. They just, they're not dominant. They're a team. They're in the mix. 6.
Yeah, it seems like, Addy, we're looking at potentially Jared Goff is the training wheels equivalent quarterback, right? Like, oh, look, Jared Goff's doing things. Like it looks like he's riding the bike. But if you were to take those Sean McVay training wheels off, I think you're picking gravel out of Jared Goff's knee pretty quickly.
Sure. A lot of people have always said that he's like one of the best first read quarterbacks in the league.
Of course.
After that first read, that's where it gets
the
dicey.
Panic sets in. He's like, Sean, help. And it's like the helmet's cut off,
right.
Jared. You can't keep talking to Sean.
What I'm concerned with about the Rams, the remaining schedule, they got Seattle twice, they got Arizona twice, and they got Tampa Bay.
Ooh.
Yeeks.
Oh my God. Fair point.
You may be looking at like a 6-10, 7-9 finish. I mean, that's a brutal stretch right there.
That's tough. San Fran, who they've already lost to once, and they're always weird,
Always weird games.
New England, always weird. I mean, that's the guys they have left to play. So we'll see.
Yeah, Cam Newton, as we saw today, tired of sucking. One of the best quotes of, I think we're all tired of sucking, Cam.
Yeah, amen, brother.
You speak for all of us this year in 2020. So, well, Mark, thank you for hitting us on that 6-pack of teams where you saw them in terms of for real or fraud. We're going to burn through a couple more segments here and get you out of here. But this is an IDP podcast. We love the defensive side of the ball. So we'd be remiss if we did not ask you, Mark, and we've each got our picks here. But as our guest, we're going to let you go first. Who has been your favorite defensive player to watch in 2020?
Well, I'm not going to go Myles Garrett because when I watch Browns games, I don't really enjoy them. I'm just sort of stressed out. Darius Leonard, to me, in part of that Colts defense, I just think that he, and when they didn't have him and then they got him back, immediate impact. And he is just going to, once a game, do something that completely alters the course of the game. I don't think that they're, what they did to Baltimore in the first half last week. I know the second half, you just knew that Baltimore was going to find a way to squeak back into that thing and get a little more productive on the ground. But that run defense is for real. Darius Leonard, to me, should have been, as a rookie, treated a little bit differently by some of the voters and some of the Pro Bowl business and the All-Pro stuff. Like no one's sleeping on him now. He's fun to watch. That whole defense is fun to watch. He's the heart and soul of it. So that's my pick.
Yeah, you're speaking Connor's love language right here. That was actually his pick as well. And, had some of the same notes, like looking at that game in the first half, because he banged up his knee, and I think that kind of limited him in the second half. But watching him in that first half, Connor, I mean, it was like the end of every single play, Darius Leonard had made the tackle or was standing very close by. I felt like he was in on every play.
He just lives up to that nickname, the Maniac. I mean, that's one of the most perfect nicknames in the NFL. That guy is sideline to sideline. He's long, so he can play the pass or he can play the run, and he is just violent. I mean, his game is violent. He's got great coordination to make plays with the ball when he actually gets his hands on him, and he has a knack for taking the ball away. So, I mean, Mark, I'm right there with you, man. That is
like it. Same page. Look at this.
Yeah, I haven't bought a jersey in a while, just because every jersey I buy, the player either gets like hurt or retired or let go of. So I've stopped that. So I feel like I'm going to curse myself if I get a Leonard jersey. But yeah, he's my guy, man. 15 tackles this last game, 13 solo, and 1 tackle for loss. I mean, he was, again, it was in a losing effort, but man, that guy, like you said, that's a difference maker. And he's, I think, doing better with the addition of DeForest Buckner, kind of clearing some space for him. I mean, that was a given, but I think DeForest is earning that, I think, $84 million or whatever Chris Ballard struck a check for. So
yeah, he is. And Leonard is on the short list of guys that crave contact, that want to just pop you in the mouth. He's very high atop that list. Great pick, Mark. Nice pick, Connor, by proxy. Addy, you're up next. Your favorite defensive player to watch. I have a feeling I know where you're going with this one.
It's my boy Budda Baker. Yeah, so I mean, pound for pound, Budda, in my opinion, is the best defensive player in the league.
100%.
He's on pace to finish for 137 tackles, 4 sacks, and 4 interceptions, and that's with him missing a week because of the thumb injury. So this is basically the same exact tackle rate as last year when he put up 147 tackles, and everyone said he was gonna regress. Didn't do that. In our RSO league, he's averaging 20 points a game. This is the best per game average among not only safeties but all IDP players.
All IDPs.
Yeah, 20 a game. So that's like Derrick Henry, Tyreek Hill.
Wow.
That's the type of player that he is. But yeah, Budda Baker, all hail King Budda.
All hail King Budda. I love it. He really is, Mark. He is pound for pound, I think, is the right phrase, right? We hear this a lot in boxing, talking about smaller boxers that are just so skilled. They have so much heart. Their technique is so flawless, and they just make plays. And that's Budda Baker to a T this season.
Yeah, I think he's just, he's sort of the future of what you want on defense. I mean, he's super versatile. I love the idea that some of these guys, we don't get a chance to watch every one of these teams. If you're just, you got Sunday to do it, you watch it, you move on. But getting him into prime time when he had that moment chasing down DK, I mean, beautiful. I thought that's just like, that's how stars are born in the NFL, in sports in general. Those moments where everyone's watching, and he's right up there, deserving of the moment. I think he makes that defense super exciting. We mentioned some of the other guys there, so I love the pick. He was on my list. I put 4 or 5 guys there, and he was certainly one of them.
Yeah. Well, I'll wrap us up here. For me, I've talked about him ad nauseum. The listeners are probably tired of hearing about it, but I can't deny what my heart feels, and my heart beats a little faster when I watch my baby, Devin White, from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Devin has been everywhere this year. He's 4th in total tackles with 82, 5th in sacks with 5. And this is for linebackers. All of the guys ahead of him on the sack list are edge rushers, the TJ Watt, Zadarius Smith types. And he is the heart of this very legitimate Tampa Bay defense. Your colleague, Greg Rosenthal, has been saying there's about 3 to 4 defenses that matter in the NFL. And I believe this is one of them. I'm not discouraged by the no-show on Sunday. Sometimes, some games, you just get your doors blown off. It happens. But I don't doubt that we're going to see this Tampa Bay team late in January, and this defense, headlined by Devin White, is going to be a big part of the reason why.
I like him too. I think that he has, like you said, every game, 2 or 3 sort of showcase moments. His speed is fun to watch. He totally shows up, explodes on tape. And I think you're right. They're one of those defenses. I'm willing to give almost every one of these teams a mulligan, where you have one game where, if you're Seattle, and Seattle's not usually prone to this, but you fly east, the classic wet team flies west coast to east and gets knocked out in Western New York. That kind of stuff happens. The Bucs game, they were due for one of those. They're still a team that's learning who they are. I mean, there's a lot of new things happening for them. They've been trustworthy in other weeks. So their defense has been pretty amazingly consistent, top 3, top 4 in the league. So he's been part of it. I'm with you.
Absolutely. All right, let's get you out of here on this. You're back into the fantasy fold. You're loving it. You're in first place, and we are excited to talk about, this is a theme we've been hitting throughout the year, right? You have fantasy surprises and fantasy disappointments. So we're going to get you out of here on this, Mark. Your fantasy surprise and disappointment for this season has been?
Well, I can wrap it up in a trade that I made where I opened up my season with Lamar Jackson and Ezekiel Elliott. And look, they're fine. I think that there's the real life scenarios that they're in creates obviously some changes and some issues. But I traded Lamar and Ezekiel Elliott. I desperately needed a running back because I had Nick Chubb as a starter. I picked up someone that's not on my list here, James Conner, just because it was someone willing to make the trade. And I even added Raheem Mostert. I mean, I wanted Mostert in case he comes back, because I'm thinking if I ever got him back, for the playoffs in that offense, I like players from teams that I trust offensively. So Lamar and Ezekiel Elliott are to me, they were disappointments and I had to move them. But a week before, I picked up Justin Herbert, who has absolutely carried my team. And he's basically done what I thought Lamar would do. And so that has been a wonderfully delightful surprise. One other surprise, I think that I tried to trade for this player too, was James Robinson. I think he's just been someone that, I mean, part of it is you're just suddenly in the right situation. We can trust you. You're productive. You're a team that's going to be behind. You want to run the ball. He can do a little bit of everything. So 2 of my guys. That's some surprises and disappointments all mixed in one.
All right, that's enough, Mark. You're taking all our guys.
Yeah, it's funny. We are just all on the same wavelength.
No.
I think we're tapped into the fantasy zeitgeist. Yeah. So, because I was going to say disappointment, Lamar Jackson, surprise, Justin Herbert, surprise, James Robinson. Yep. But it's true. There are these kind of, ubiquitous guys when you attach disappointment and surprise as the label that are going to bubble up to the top of the conversation. So Lamar was my pick. He's sitting between Teddy Bridgewater and Carson Wentz right now at QB 14 in our main league. That's very disappointing for where you drafted him. And after getting a chance to watch him this Sunday, Mark, I don't know. There's something not quite right about that Baltimore offense right now. I don't know if they just really miss Mark Ingram, if they are just lacking that true alpha number 1 wide receiver. I don't know what's going on there, but it's affecting Lamar Jackson this season. But my surprise has been in his same division. I'm going with Joe Burrow. Now, this is fantasy. I think Burrow has top 5 upside in the real NFL, but to see him as a top 12 fantasy quarterback with a bad team is very encouraging. If you take out his pummeling from Baltimore, which most QBs are going to get pummeled in that situation, he's averaging 24.5 points. You love to see it. He's not quite been to Herbert's level of brilliance, but Burrow has been a lot of fun this season, Mark.
I love him. And, part of me is concerned that Baker Mayfield is the 4th best quarterback in that division. And I'm not taking a shot at Baker Mayfield, but it's suddenly so stacked. He just seems to have eyes in the back of his head. He escapes pressure really well. They dealt with, I think the line is getting a little bit better, but the line was such a disaster early. And he's just tough. When I talk about the future of quarterbacks, I would put him right in there because he's able to move and create all sorts of problems with his legs too. So the real life will always matter more to me. And in real life, I think he'll change Cincinnati football for the next 15 years.
Absolutely.
If they don't get him killed first.
Exactly.
It's early shades of like Andrew Luck behind a Grigson line where you're just like, oh, he loves getting hit. Look at that. He laughs when they hit him. And then you're like, oh, man, he's got a lacerated kidney and he's, bleeding internally. And it was sad, man.
He's sitting in a dark room contemplating his existence
Don't
and
get me
walking away
started.
from
I have to
football.
turn the Funko Pop the other way.
They got to turn the Andrew
I'm
Luck
gonna have a
Funko
tear.
Pop
Yeah.
around.
Got a book club, Connor.
Yeah,
He does.
I
That
unsubscribed
would
from
be
his book
that
club.
would you'd be in trouble if he starts the book club because he's thinking about other ways to spend his time.
That should have been the sign. He got a smartphone, so he was looking at, Twitter and stuff and starting the book club. He was planting the seeds for his post-NFL career. So, Addy, you mentioned Justin Herbert. Talk on Mr. Herbs here, and then hit us with your disappointment as well.
Sure. So, Justin Herbert, he's PFF's 14th best graded passer. Josh, you'll be pleased to know that Joe Burrow was 13th.
Very nice.
But it's Herbert for me because, the expectations weren't there for Herbert like
Not
they
at all.
were with Burrow and Tua. Herbert was going in the second round of Superflex drafts, fourth rounds, and 1 QB drafts. But this is a guy that's averaging 29 points a game right now. Only Russell Wilson, Kyler Murray, and Patrick Mahomes are doing better on a per game basis.
Wow. I love it. But people keep asking, is Herbert legit for fantasy purposes? Yes, they are letting him bomb the ball down the field.
Yeah.
And he's not getting the wins, but that's because the Chargers are cursed. For fantasy purposes, that doesn't matter. Herbs has been balling out.
That does concern me for Dynasty, the curse. Something's going on there.
Is their stadium on a practice facility on a ancient burial ground or something here, Mark, like Cleveland's is? What is going on with the Chargers?
I mean, I can't blame the stadium at this point. It's one of the most beautiful looking buildings around. Or it was old LA ground before. I'm sure a lot of mobsters, unmarked dollar bills, crime. I wouldn't, count any of that out, old school stuff. But I wouldn't, I think they're a team I could see had they not lost one or two of these games and had they been closer to the wild card, discussion, who would want to deal with them? They're so freaky. I love that you picked Herbert and everything that you just said about him too, that, you thought with Anthony Lynn, they're just going to want to run the ball 50 times. I think losing Austin Eckler helped a little bit because they had to change their offense. And then suddenly Herbert's like, this guy is meant to throw the ball 35 times a game and destroy you through the air, and everyone just has to go with it. There could be no resistance. You just got to go with it.
That's right. It has this Tyrod Taylor getting the lung punctured, Austin Eckler going out. It's been a continuous evolution this season. And fortunately for fantasy players, it has resulted in Justin Herbert being a top 5 option at the position. Addy, but we got to talk a little bit of heartbreak and disappointment. Who's your pick here?
Kenyan Drake. Currently the RB28. This was a guy that was being drafted in the second and third rounds of drafts in August. Meanwhile, Chase Edmonds is RB15 right now.
Wow.
And looks better when he's out there.
Could have got him probably 4 or 5 rounds later.
Was going undrafted in a lot of leagues.
Wow.
Picked him up off waivers in quite a few leagues.
Wow. That is saying something about Kenyan Drake and the utility just of the Cardinals running back in general. This is one of those offenses kind of like the 49ers where just that running back is valuable, whether it's Edmonds, who at this point we have to ask, is he a better running back than Kenyan Drake? I think at least for this season, the jury might be siding with Edmonds on that one.
The best running back there is Kyler, though.
Correct. That is an accurate point there. So Connor, wrap us up. Mark mentioned your surprise there with James Robinson. I hate to end with disappointment, but we got to do it. And we're going to go straight to the heart here with the Indianapolis Colts.
Yeah, the disappointment side with Jonathan Taylor. It is it's where to place the blame, right? And I think there's a fair amount to go around. Was this just too much too soon? I mean, he was quoted kind of early on as how thankful he was to have a guy like Marlon Mack, who has got a great skill set, great vision. I think that'd be Marlon's biggest strength. And I think that would help for a guy like Taylor, who, he busted things up at Wisconsin. It was a bowling ball, but I think he was kind of just forced into action just because of Mack's Achilles. So I think there's some blame there and trying to figure out how to use him and what his best running style is. But it's just overall, it looks like a lack of burst. And you're supposed to have this dominant O-line, which I think has also regressed, especially in relation to the run game. Not so much the passing game when you consider, like Mark alluded to, you literally have a statue back there, as we saw in the last game against Baltimore, with him falling down on that tackle. So hard to figure out where the blame lies exactly, but there's a lot to go around there with Jonathan Taylor, and why you're seeing a second rounder kind of underperform, in my opinion.
Yeah, Mark, as an outsider, help us out here. Give us a clear-eyed view of Jonathan Taylor. Should Colts fans be worried? I mean, Trent Richardson's name is getting brought up.
Say that.
We're a little spooked right now. So what's been your take on Taylor? Do we have reason to be optimistic, or should we be very worried?
I think he's been a disappointment, but I think sometimes running backs can be dealing with health stuff that we don't know about. Running backs can be really year-to-year proposition, where if he diagnosed his offseason a little bit differently and worked on certain things, guys can come back and look 10 times more explosive. I think Mark Ingram is someone that did that over the court a couple years back, is one of his last years with the Saints. He looked like a completely different guy to me. And it helped him get a new contract there, and then more work with Baltimore. And we saw what he did last year. So I would never write him off, but it has been one of the bigger problems, because I think in theory, you base the whole offense around him, and they don't have the guy to do that. I mean, Nyheim Hines has probably been more, was underused last week. I mean, he's been a little bit more dangerous in that. And the whole Marlon Mack thing didn't go the way they wanted to. There were whispers in August that they actually liked Marlon Mack a lot more at that point. So, the plan has not gone correctly. I wouldn't give up on the player yet.
JT is a BUST bust, baby.
Yeah, throwing the fart sound in just as a total gut punch. You're fired from the show. I don't want to hear from you anymore the rest of this hour. Yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah, I agree, Mark. I think we have to take a wait and see approach. I think let's see how Jonathan Taylor's vision and burst looks with a full off season. Hopefully not in a pandemic world. He gets a little more acclimated with this offense, and maybe that will help with the issues that we're seeing. I'm hopeful, because this team needs him, I think, to be the kind of offense they want to be moving forward. So, Mark, as always, as Dan likes to say, you came on, you said it all, you did it all, and we so appreciate you coming on and making us laugh, enlightening our listeners. We are just very thankful for you, Mark.
Well, it's really fun to do your show. And I told you that last time, that I think you guys have this really, you can't just make up chemistry out of nowhere. You have it, and that's a gift. That's a cool thing. And I learned from you guys too. And I apologize for dropping like 42 names during that last segment, but I'm going to keep listening and keep doing what you're doing, and talk to you soon, I hope.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hit us with the details. We mentioned at the top of the show, the podcast. Hit us with the Twitter handle. Where can people find you, and what can they expect from you coming up rest of season?
Twitter handle's just my name, Marc Sessler, Mark with a C. And our show is on a pretty rigid schedule. It's every Sunday night. We go through every single game, and we wait until the end of Sunday Night Football to cap it off with a recap of that. And so that's our one show. We do a Tuesday show where we'll, hit some news, maybe do a segment, have a guest. And then we have a Thursday preview show that you can listen to. The first half of it is also on NFL Network, appearing at 8 a.m. Eastern. And then sometime late at night, when people have a few beers into my hope, to make the experience a little more enjoyable. That's where we are right now. We write a little bit. I have a column that comes out every Tuesday on NFL.com. I usually tweet it out. That seems like a lot of me and a lot of us. So, pick your battles.
There you go. Lots to choose from. Make sure you're tuning in to the pod. Make sure you're subscribed. Follow Mark on Twitter and watch the ATN broadcast on NFL Network. It is a great program. And Mark, will you give our love to all the gang, but in particular, Chris Wessling, one of our favorites, going through a second battle with the Big C, a new father. I know this has been a challenging year in multiple respects for him. Please give our love and thoughts to Chris Wessling.
Yeah, I will. He's a super strong guy. He's been through this twice now. And, whenever he is able to come on our show, I think that anyone who's a part of it and listening to it sees the difference. And that's what our show is. It's when he's there. And so I will pass it on. And I know it matters to him to hear from everyone. I mean, it's, that's the kind of stuff, especially in these weird times where we can't really all go hang out with him as much as we would normally. Like it can lift him up. So thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you all for listening. Hope you enjoyed this episode. Be sure to subscribe to the pod and leave us a review on Apple Podcasts. Thank you to all of our patrons. Addie, this was a fun episode. We love having guests on the show. Mark is one of our favorites, and we're going to keep plugging along and bringing you guys some fun league-winning content the rest of the season.
Yes, sir. Ready to go viral.
Mark, he's on this viral kick, Mark. I don't know that we'll ever get there, but if we do, you will never see Adam again.
We'll call it micro-viral, right?
Yeah,
every podcast has, that one guy that is like itching to become sort of super famous. So I think we've picked out who this is, and I wish you well on that front.
Thank you. I want to go full blown viral and then get canceled a few days later.
Immediate cancel.
That's the biggest concern.
Almost
just
immediately
getting canceled.
In the same press release. Markham has gone viral. Markham has been canceled. So look forward to that. Look forward to the shows we have coming up the rest of the week. Look forward to the Around the NFL podcast and another week of the NFL. The wheel keeps turning. Hopefully it doesn't fall off the wagon. We will see. Stay tuned. But thank you all for listening. Stay safe. Enjoy your weekend, and we will see you all next week.